Welcome back. We are just over a week away from the Florida primaries. We've spoke to many of the gubernatorial candidates. Democratic candidate Chris King stepped in and spoke with Alan Cohn on why he believes he should be the next governor of Florida. Alan?
Thanks, Jacqueline. Well, the race for governor is getting down to it. The primaries on the 28th. The Republican and Democratic candidates for governor are crisscrossing the state. And joining us once again is Chris King, the Orlando businessman running for his party's nomination for governor. Chris, you're getting down to it right now in a very competitive Democratic field. What is your strategy in the final few days, weeks before the primary?
Well, we're in the final weeks, couple weeks from today, and I'm on day 5 of a 12-day, 20-county bus trip across Florida, where I'm talking about some of the hard issues, some of the tough problems of Florida that conventional politics has failed to solve, and trying to provide the leadership that this state needs, and meeting a lot of interesting people along the journey.
You know, it's really tough when you cover a race like this because you want to talk to the candidates about the horse race itself, what you have to do to wind up as the Democratic nominee, but you also want to talk about the issues and what the distinction between you and your competitors. If there is one major difference between you and Gwen Graham and Jeff Green and Phil Levine and Andrew Gillum, what would that be?
Well, what voters have told me when they've said, Chris, we're voting for you, or we've already voted for you, is they talk about our willingness to show political courage, that our willingness to take on things like Big Sugar from the earliest days of my campaign for the benefit of our environment made me stick out in this race. My willingness to make criminal justice reform and institutional racism, standing up to policies and laws like Stand Your Ground that are not good for the people of Florida, I think that set me apart. I've been willing to say things and go to places in this race other candidates have not been willing to go. And I'm the first candidate, for instance, that said I oppose the death penalty completely, wholly, and would do everything in my power to bring it to an end in Florida. That's not something you're going to hear from another Democrat in this race.
A Democrat has not won the governor's mansion in 20 years in Florida. And local Democrats are looking for a winner, looking for someone who can change that. So they also want to hear, considering the Suncoast is a heavily Republican area, how can their candidate appeal to voters around here in an area that's rich with Republicans?
Well, Alan, first, I think we got to go to those places. You know, I was in Hernando County yesterday. Hadn't voted blue or Democrat in a long, long time. I'm in Sarasota County and Manatee today. I get some of my biggest crowds in red counties across the state of Florida because I believe I'm coming with a vision that addresses many of the pocketbook issues that impact Republicans and Democrats. And if I'm the candidate in the general election, I believe when I'm able to step forward and offer solutions to fix our affordable housing crisis, which is not a partisan issue, to try to cover or provide health care services for 2.5 million Floridians that right now don't have access to a doctor who knows their name. Again, not a partisan issue. Or our big idea, we're the only one in the field talking about free community college and trade school in the Sunshine State, actually modeled after the red state of Tennessee, a Republican governor who passed it, saying that it was one of the best economic ideas to lift wages and train the workforce of the future.
So what would you say to a typical Republican voter around here who just basically has a baseline belief that Democrats will raise taxes and Republicans will lower them?
Well, I would say I'm not that guy. You know, my background is I'm an entrepreneur. I started a small business from scratch 12 years ago, believing with hard work and discipline and a great idea that we could do big things. And today I serve affordable housing to thousands and thousands of families all across the southeastern United States. I believe Democrats have to demonstrate that we can cast big ideas, but then show how we're going to pay for them, and recognize that in a state like Florida, this is a low-tax state. People move here for a variety of reasons, one of which is they don't want to pay a lot in taxes. And so we have to be creative and strategic to make sure that we're not raising their taxes, but that we are investing in the things they care about that are important to their children and their grandchildren and the future of this state.
Okay. We are just getting warmed up here. We're going to have much more with Democratic gubernatorial candidate Chris King right after this. Welcome back, everyone. We are talking to Democratic gubernatorial candidate Chris King. Let's continue our conversation. With the retirement of U.S. Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy, we may well have a new Supreme Court justice that has made a lot of Democrats and a lot of people who believe in the woman's right to choose very, very nervous. If Roe versus Wade were overturned, it would be up to the states to write their own laws. You may well be dealing with a Republican legislature that might be the first thing that they would do. Democrats around here would want to know what your game plan would be.
Well, as you know, I'm pro-choice, and I believe it is the wrong decision to criminalize abortion. And so if that were to occur and this Supreme Court were to take our nation in a different direction, it's incumbent upon Democratic governors like myself, if I was so fortunate, to stand in the gap and protect the civil rights, women's rights, LGBT rights, labor rights, that I think all will be under attack in that kind of scenario. And folks can appreciate that if Chris King is the next governor of Florida, I will be very assertive in using the power of this office to protect communities across the state of Florida. You know, I said from my very first speech, in this state today, it is still legal to discriminate against members of the LGBT community in almost half the state. To me, that's not right, and it's something I will work very hard to fix upon election.
As I said at the outset, it's difficult when you interview candidates, especially this close to the primary or general election, because inevitably you have to talk about the horse race. You're up on television, everybody has seen your ads on this station and elsewhere, but you're up also against a guy who is a billionaire, another guy who is also a millionaire, and Gwen Graham, who has some kind of lead in the polls at this point. So how do you get from where you are right now to being the winner on primary night?
Well, I knew, my wife and I knew when we decided to do this was going to be an uphill battle, and it's clearly an uphill battle until election night. I've got to work harder, I've got to hustle more, but most importantly, I think what I have to show the people of Florida is that if they elect me, they're getting something different. They're getting a Democrat not only who can win, because we've lost 21 of 25 times since 2000 in statewide elections, but more importantly, they're getting someone who is willing and wants to be transformative, who's not just trying to win an election, but is trying to transform the future of Florida politics, trying to take on the sugar industry for the benefit of our environment, trying to be a champion for public education when we haven't had one in 20 years, trying to do things in criminal justice reform and affordable housing that nobody is talking about. To me, that's the type of leader that could really get Democrats and hopefully, more importantly, the general electorate very excited.
But are you able to do that when you have, let's say, call it as it is, a billionaire out there who is spending millions and millions of dollars on television to introduce himself to Florida Democratic voters? You have a lot of money yourself, but it's I would imagine it's hard to keep up with that.
Well, I think ideas matter. And, I might be idealistic or romantic when it comes to how people make decisions, but I found that when people meet us, when they hear us, when they attend an event or see one of our commercials, they come to appreciate that we're different and that our heart's in the right place and that we've got a big vision for Florida. And most of the folks who followed this race closely have said that I am the substance candidate. I am the one who has cast a vision for the state of Florida that would take us in a new and bright direction, and I'm hoping they'll choose that kind of candidate to lead them.
We don't want to get ahead of ourselves here, but President Trump has really upended the Republican race by inserting himself into the Republican primary. Congressman DeSantis has jumped out to a lead. What kind of campaign, whether it's you or the other Democrats, what would you have to wage to take on somebody of that kind of, from that wing of the Republican Party?
Sure, it's increasingly clear to me that Ron DeSantis will be the Republican nominee for governor, and he will have a President Trump here in Florida constantly fighting on his behalf. President Trump does not want to lose the Sunshine State going into the next presidential election. So for me, Democrats have got to choose a candidate who can go toe-to-toe with Ron DeSantis, somebody who can outthink him, outwork him, out-hustle him across the state of Florida. And we're going to have a lot of eyeballs on this race when it comes to the general election. And I believe that I've demonstrated in the debates, if people have watched me debating, and if they've watched me speak across the state of Florida, that we have a vision that can go toe-to-toe with Ron DeSantis. It's different, it's progressive, it's bold, and it lifts families up across the state. It's compassionate, it cares about people, and that's the message that I'm going to fight Donald Trump with.
All right, Chris King, good luck to you in the final weeks of this campaign.